And thank you, everybody. Welcome. So happy to be here with you this morning. And so we're going to be talking today about emotional intelligence, this critical skill set for the workforce of the future. And so let's talk for a moment here about what emotional intelligence actually is. So it's a set of skills that help us to better perceive and understand and manage emotions in ourselves and in others. And so collectively, they help us to make intelligent responses to and use of emotions. So these skills are every bit as important as your intellect or your IQ in determining success both in your work and in your life. So everyone, no matter what job function they're in, has interactions with other people. And your capacity to be able to understand your emotions, to be aware of them and how they impact the way you behave and relate to others will improve your people skills, if you will, and help you ultimately be more satisfied and successful. So it truly is the science of how we show up. So today we're focused on emotional intelligence and how it's rapidly becoming a critical skill set to develop in this age of artificial intelligence. And as the world of work becomes increasingly impacted by automation and artificial intelligence or AI, the skills of emotional intelligence will become a core capability at every job level. So AI is not the future, it's here, it's now, and it's going to emerge quicker than we can ever imagine. And the wave has already started, and it's going to crash into our lives like a tsunami. And once that force of a tsunami starts, it's unstoppable. So it's here and it's coming. And so let's take a moment and watch a brief video to demonstrate what's already here and evolving as we speak. So Heather.
Hi, Sophia. How are you?
Hi there. Everything is going extremely well.
Do you like talking with me?
Yes, talking to people is my primary function.
Hanson Robotics develops extremely lifelike robots for human-robot interactions.
Hey, Sherry, it was timing out, but it was at the end of the video, so I think we can continue on.
Okay, I'm just getting back to our slides here. Okay, can everyone see? Heather, the slides back up?
You're good.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so should you be concerned? Absolutely. It's going to impact all of us. So unskilled jobs or lower skilled jobs are going to be the first to be affected. And a 2019 McKinsey study indicated that nearly 40% of current US jobs are in occupational categories that will shrink likely due to AI between now and 2030. So this includes jobs such as office support, food services, production work, customer service, retail sales. And if you think about this, what percentage of jobs might that be worldwide? So anything that's a rote process can be done faster and better by AI. But these are not the only roles that will be affected. So previously, people in more professional level roles, like probably most of us here in this room today, even those that are better paid, they require a bachelor's degree or higher, those types of folks often felt safe that, you know, our knowledge worker status is going to protect us from this, right? No, it's wrong. So doctors make diagnoses from a lifetime of experiences. They cannot out-diagnose a machine that in seconds makes a diagnosis from millions of lifetimes of experience. Investment consultants, for example, look at a client's objectives and sift through the investment options that they're aware of and produce a recommendation. AI will sift through every known option and it'll do it faster. So AI is now expected to impact numerous well-paid occupations like market research analysts, sales managers, programmers, engineers, and more. So what do? Are we doomed to watching our careers just fade away? Of course not, but it's not necessarily going to be an easy transition. So the biggest challenge will be for humans to be able to find their passion amongst new responsibilities, new types of roles that require our uniquely human capacities. So the Association for Psychological Science commissioned a study that concluded with reference to AI-based emotion recognition systems that because individuals express emotions in a variety of ways, it's difficult to infer feeling reliably just from a simple set of facial movements. So at this time, technology is far from being able to understand and respond accurately to emotions. Therefore, we are in no danger of AI replacing humans in that category for some time to come. So this is perhaps your greatest ever opportunity to differentiate yourself. AI is only a threat if you're not prepared. And if you understand the prepare accordingly, then the world of work in the future could be even more rewarding as jobs are upgraded and they're expanded. But the time to start digging this well is today, not waiting until you're thirsty. So as we move further and further into this age of artificial intelligence, your essential humanness is going to become your greatest differentiator. So let's explore a little bit about what research is saying about emotional intelligence in this age of artificial intelligence. So a 2017 Harvard Business Review article pointed out the importance of developing emotional intelligence skills. And so there's simply a lot of things that machines can do better than we can. So think about it. Many skilled jobs follow a workflow that goes something like this. You gather data, you analyze that data, you interpret the results, you determine a recommended course of action from there, and then finally implement the course of action. So there's three key capabilities that are involved in that process. The first is the ability to perform those early rote tasks quickly and accurately. The second capability is using their experience and judgment then to determine the path forward. And then the third capability is their ability to help clients, patients, colleagues to navigate that path forward. Now, AI and machine learning will quickly surpass our capabilities in those first two. But what AI has a hard time doing is understanding, motivating, and interacting with human beings. So while AI might be able to do a better job of diagnosing an illness and recommending options for treatment, it's going to take a human to sit down with that patient, to discuss their overall situation, and to help to determine the optimal plan. So as the article states, skills like persuasion, social understanding, and empathy will be your differentiators. And Capgemini Research Institute has also done a lot of study in this area as well. And one of their findings is that 83% of organizations see EI as a key ingredient to success. So rather than just talk with you about emotional intelligence, I'd like to give you an opportunity to experience it in action. So what I'd ask you to do is to take a moment and find 2 blank sheets of paper and grab a pen. So I'll give you a moment to do that. Any scrap paper will do. Okay, so the first thing I'd like you to do is think of someone from your present or your past who had a very positive impact on you. So ideally, I'm talking about a manager or a leader who really impacted you in a good way, but it can be anyone from your life who impacted you in this manner. So take a moment now and write that person's name on the top of your first sheet of paper, and then draw a line underneath. Okay, our next step is write the numbers 1 through 6 on your page as you see here. And please leave room at the bottom because there are going to be other things that you're writing, but numbers 1 through 6. So in our next step, I'm going to show you 6 statements, one at a time. And as I reveal each one, I'd like you to think about the way that person behaved. And then for each statement, you're going to rate them on the scale that runs from 1 to 5. So here's the first statement. Demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. And so if this person you brought to mind demonstrated this awareness significantly less than would be typical of other people, then you'd score them 1 for this behavior. If they demonstrated this behavior significantly more than others, then score them a 5. And if they're somewhere in between, then select the appropriate score from the scale. Once you've decided on that score, note it down on your sheet next to the appropriate statement number. Okay, second statement. Makes others feel appreciated. Same person, think about their behavior. How would you rate them on their demonstration of making others feel appreciated? Give you a moment to do that. Okay, our third statement is open and honest about mistakes. How would you rate this best ever boss, coworker, mentor, coach in their demonstration of that behavior? Our fourth statement is makes ethical decisions. Again, with this person in mind, how would you rate their demonstration of that behavior? Our fifth statement, manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. Again, scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this best ever boss? And statement number 6, recognizes others' hard work and achievements. Scale of 1 to 5, how often did they demonstrate this? Significantly less, significantly more than others, or somewhere in between? Okay, so at this point, you should have 6 scores now, 1 for each statement. I'd like you to take a moment to total your scores and then write that total down and draw a line underneath your ratings section. So take a moment to add your scores up and note that total. Since these are technical people, I imagine you can do this pretty quickly. So I'm going to move us on to our next piece here. Okay, so I'd like you to think about now how you typically felt when you were around this person. How did they or do they make you feel if there's somebody currently in your life? This is about the impact that they had on you. And so what I'd like to have you do is write down a few simple words that summarize how they made you feel when you were around them. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to do this, to write as many or as few words as come to mind about how you felt when you were around this person. Okay, hopefully you've had enough time to jot some words down. So finally, what I want you to think about is how motivated you were to work hard for this person. So what discretionary effort you were prepared to invest in working for this person, or if they weren't your boss, then how much discretionary effort were you willing to expend just to help them out? Now, discretionary efforts, a term that's used a lot in connection with employee engagement. So highly engaged employees tend to contribute high discretionary effort. They tend to routinely give more than the minimum required. And as some say, they go the extra mile. So at the bottom of your sheet, I'd like you to rate your discretionary effort. So a 10 would be, I'd run through a brick wall for this person. That's pretty high discretionary effort. And 1 is I'd do the least possible to get by. So for this person that you've been working with, how would you rate your discretionary effort? Okay, so now we're going to look at the other side of the coin. So I'd like you now to think of someone in your past or your present who was particularly difficult or challenging. Again, ideally, this is a manager or a leader that you worked for. That would be a really good demonstration for you here. But it can be anyone from your life who really impacted you in all the wrong ways. So take your second sheet of paper now and write that person's name on the top. And as we did before, write the numbers 1 through 6 on your page as you see here and leave space. You now know we'll be doing some other things, so leave some space down below. Now we're going to do the same scoring exercise for this person. I'm going to show you the same 6 statements one at a time. And as I reveal each one, I'd like you to think about that person and the way they behaved. And then for each statement, we're going to rate on the scale again that runs from 1 to 5. So again, the first statement demonstrates awareness of their mood and emotions. So if the person demonstrated this awareness significantly less than others, then you'd rate them a 1. And if they demonstrated this behavior significantly more than others, you would rate them a 5. Or if they were somewhere in between, select the appropriate score and write that down next to number 1 on your sheet. Okay, let's go with our second statement now. Makes others feel appreciated. So take a moment and rate them 1 to 5. And again, this is your worst ever boss, coworker, mentor, coach, whoever it was you selected. Number 3 is open and honest about mistakes. What score would you give this person here? Number 4 is makes ethical decisions. What rating? And jot that down. Number 5, manages their emotions effectively in difficult situations. And then finally, rate them on recognizes others' hard work and achievements. So once again, you should now have 6 scores, 1 for each statement. So take a moment to total those scores, write that number down, and then draw a line underneath your rating section. Okay, so let's move to the next part of this exercise again. So I'm going to repeat the second part of the exercise for this person. Now I want you to think about how you typically felt when you were around this person. How did they make you feel? Again, this is about the impact that they had on you. So I'll give you 20 seconds to write down a few simple words that summarize how they made you feel when you were around them. So write as many or as few as you wish. And we'll start the 20 seconds now. Okay, and now again, let's look at discretionary effort. So rate how hard you were motivated to work for this person. And again, 10 is as hard as humanly possible, and little is as 1 as I could do to get by, as little as I could do to get by, or somewhere in between. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten all of these pieces put together. Thanks for working with me on this. So now what I'd like to ask you to do is go back to that first sheet, the one where you rated the boss or the coworker or the mentor who had a positive impact on you, and look at the total of your 6 scores. So with 6 questions, having a minimum score of 1 and a maximum of 5, you should have a number somewhere between 6 and 30. And Now go to the second sheet, the one where you rated the boss, coworker, mentor, coach, teacher, etc., who was the worst for you, who was difficult or challenging, and note the total of the scores for that person. And so if you're comfortable doing so, I'd invite you to go into chat now and please tell us those two scores. So first, the score for the positive impact person, and then the negative impact person. So for example, 26/10. Best one, worst one. So whatever it is for you. And Heather, I'd love to have you read off as people start to put their scores in.
So I was 28-13. We have 24-9, 28-9, 28-10, 25-12, 24-7. Let's see, 30-15, direct path, 27-15, 25-7, 28-17, 23-14, 38.
Wow.
28-9. So 2 different people, 25-30 and a 10 and a 30.
Wow. Okay, great. So thank you everybody for sharing your scores. And so, and Heather, thanks for reading those off for me. So I think it's fair to say, based on the scores that we just heard, that these two people had a very different impact on you. So the difference in the scores from the first to the second person are very different, sometimes dramatically so. And so what you've just done is rate the observable emotional intelligence of these two people. You saw clearly how it's possible to objectively measure and score the difference between the way one person showed up for positive impact and another showed up for negative impact. And what you should notice too is that what you used to score these two people were just behaviors. They weren't attributes over which people have no control, like their height or their eye color, but they represented the way these people chose to show up in their interactions with you. And so the really good news here is that if you were the low scoring person and you saw that impact and you didn't like to think of yourself in that way, you could choose to make a change. So behavior is a choice we make. We get to choose how we show up. And sometimes just giving someone a look at how they impact others is more than enough to incentivize them to want to make that change enough that they begin to shift their chosen behaviors. Now, for the higher scoring person, there's good news there too, because there were a handful of perfect scores, but there weren't that many 30s. So that's because few people turn up in a totally positive way in every situation all of the time. But they could choose to take note of the situations in which their behavior is less positively impactful and modify it so that they have even more positive impact, engaging their employees and the people around them even more completely. And so, paraphrasing from W. Edwards Deming, who I'm sure you know is the father of the quality movement, what you can measure, you can improve. But why would we bother to improve? So let's look at that now. So remember those bullets that you wrote down about how the two people made you feel? Who would be willing to share in chat what you wrote down for your best boss? And again, we're not naming names here, so I'd love to just hear. And again, just put it into chat. And Heather, if you could read those things off to me. What did you write down about how that best boss made you feel?
Appreciated, valued, seen, heard, confident, valued, worthy, impacted, valued, knowledgeable, inspired, empowered, supported, disciplined, brave, confident, respected, appreciated, trusted, valued, respected, inspired. All really good, positive.
Wow. Well, and you can feel it, right? So thank you, everybody, for openly sharing. It is powerful when you hear those words. Now, we're going to go back to the dark side here for a minute. And what are some of those words you wrote down about how the worst boss made you feel?
Nervous, worst, gaslit, yeah. Belittled, unheard, attacked, on edge, uneasy, unworthy, small, undervalued, unmotivated, anxious, defeated, inept, not trusted, unimportant, taken advantage of, unappreciated, frustrated, empty. I felt weak myself personally. On guard, uncomfortable, anxious, angry.
Wow. And so like the feeling, thank you very much for being open and sharing that. And it's palpable. You can feel, even though we're not physically in the same room together, I can feel the energy difference between what the words we talked about originally and the words we talked about now. And you can really feel how much that person that we just talked about, the worst boss, impacted you. And oftentimes even a bigger presence in the room than the positive. And part of that is because neuroscience tells us that we're 3 or 4 times more attuned to negative experiences in life, and that they have a much more dramatic and memorable impact on us. And that's the whole point of this exercise. Every single one of us is impacting everyone we interact with day in and day out in our personal lives and in our business lives. And if the way that we impact people is in any way important to us, if we're managers tasked with engaging people to give their best efforts, or parents with the awesome responsibility of giving the next generation the best possible start in life, then our impact on people, our emotional intelligence, is tremendously important. So finally, remember I asked you to rate the discretionary effort you gave these 2 people, how hard you were prepared to work for them. Please look at your scores for that first person, the best boss. Now I predict you scored this person probably 6 or higher, and I'm curious whether I'm right or not. So please put your score for discretionary effort for the good boss in chat. And Heather, as these come in, love for you to read them out.
I put in an 8. We have a bunch of 10s, some 9s. 8.5, okay. Between a 9 and a 10, 9 and 10, 9. So it looks like the lowest that we're seeing here is an 8.
Okay, so that's even higher than I predicted, and it seems that's awesome, and that's what I would have said too for the person who's in my mind as the best boss. That would be a 10, and it seems like most of you would have gone out of your way to do a really good job for this person. Now we're going to go to the dark side again and look at how you rated your discretionary effort for the difficult person. So I predict you probably rated that effort somewhere at 5 or below. Certainly lower than the first person. And so with this score, please feel free to share that score in chat. But if you'd prefer to keep that score to yourself, that's completely fine. My question is it lower than your first number? So you can either put in, yes?
It's everybody's lower. So I put in a 3. There's a lot of 3s, 1s, 4s, 5, a 2. So I'm not seeing, okay, someone did put in a 7. There is a 7.
Okay.
So she's just really hard worker. That's why.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with whether we're hard workers or not. It's that whole motivation of like, how motivated are we to really go out of our way for this person, right?
Yeah, and like Sam said, she started out at an 8, but then it just kept going lower, like over time.
Yeah. And so thank you everybody for sharing. I really appreciate your honesty and your participation here. So, you know, let's look at the implications here. Every one of you is probably similar to me in the fact that you've got a work ethic. You know, you see yourself as values driven, a principled person who's going to be fair in their dealings with people, including those they work for. And yet, in this exercise, we almost show up like 2 different people, depending on how our boss showed up, how they behaved towards you and other people that worked for them, how they made you feel. The discretionary effort you were prepared to give varied widely in most cases. And so we're all the same. You know, we'll go the extra mile for bosses and colleagues who treat us in an emotionally intelligent manner. And this is the very essence of employee engagement. And without emotionally intelligent managers and leaders, it's impossible to maximize employee engagement and impossible to maximize that humanness that is our greatest differentiator in the world of AI. So let's summarize what we've seen so far. First, we saw that the way we show up, the extent to which we choose to behave in an emotionally intelligent manner, has a huge impact on how we influence people, positively or negatively. Second, we saw that we could easily identify the difference between someone with high emotional intelligence and someone with low emotional intelligence just by observing how they behave when they're around us. Thirdly, we saw that we could easily and objectively score our level of EI or that of somebody else so that we could understand not only how developed those capabilities are right now, but also if they need development to identify what behaviors need to change the most. And fourth, we saw there's a direct connection between discretionary effort and emotionally intelligent behavior. And so this is engagement in action. We saw just how engaging someone is with high emotional intelligence and just how disengaging someone is with low emotional intelligence. And finally, all of these behaviors are clearly choices. We choose how we show up. And we could make changes in our behaviors toward others, allow some time for them to have the impact we've seen they always have on people, and then go back and rate our EI a few weeks or months after we made these changes to see if what we're doing is working. But I'd like to ask you two final questions. Out of curiosity, how many people selected someone from their past for the positive person? And of those of you who did, how far in the past was this person? 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, more? And so if you could drop that number of years into chat, I'd love to hear how long ago it was. Heather, what's coming up?
I put in 20 years ago. It was in the beginning of my career. We have someone, a lot of more recent though, 3 years, 7 years. Laurel said 9 years ago. Sam's lucky enough been working for over 15 years part-time, so that's good for her. 3 years ago. It sort of runs the gamut.
Runs the gamut. Mine was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I was way back when.
Okay, so let's turn the tide on this. So what about the negative person? Was that somebody from a while ago, 5, 10, 15, 20? How long ago was the negative person?
1 year ago, says Danielle. 4 years ago, says Sam. Okay, one person's currently actually working for them now. 3 years ago, 9 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 15 years ago, 2 months ago, and then see that drove Jen to leave. I think she just made a move out because of that, boss.
Interesting.
Yeah, good for you, Jen, says Renee. I agree. Yeah, and mine was a while ago as well, and didn't have, but it was around 12 years ago.
Yeah. So what we can see here is that in some cases these are more recent circumstances, but you can also see that there are many people who still remember that most difficult person from decades ago. And so this is a critical point. And I'll bet those people who have had something more recently, I bet if I checked in with you 15 or 20 years from now, you'll still remember that, this particular person that you've been dealing with. So it's a critical point to keep in mind, because the way we impact someone emotionally is not a fleeting thing. That impact lasts, sometimes for a lifetime. And that's how reputations are built, for good or for bad. And we all get to choose what our reputation, or indeed our legacy, is going to be. So because we all get the choice of how we show up, how we behave around other people, we can do something about this. So what I often find with this exercise is that the first people who come to mind for positive or for negative are those who made the biggest overall impression on those people in their lives. And that can sometimes be half a lifetime ago or more. So the way we impact someone emotionally lasts. And as Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so since emotionally intelligent behavior skills like persuasion, social understanding, and empathy will be our differentiators in a world of AI and machine learning, how might we set the stage to expand our capabilities? So I'd like to share with you here this model of emotional intelligence that speaks to the core capabilities and competencies to be considering as you think about improving your own emotional intelligence. So this model is the Genos model of emotional intelligence, and it was designed specifically to make it practical and easy to measure observable emotional intelligence behaviors. And it was designed by the CEO of Genos, Dr. Ben Palmer, in the late 1990s. So we now have over 20 years of subsequent research that's been invested in it. And I actually had the privilege, I'm in the middle of a Train the Trainer program for something related to emotional intelligence. I was on a Zoom call with Dr. Palmer last night. So it's great to still be in touch with him after all these years. And this model underlies an assessment process that allows organizations to accurately measure the way people show up and then determine what needs to be done to improve each person's result. And so it's all about observable behaviors. So we've got these 6 scales here. Each of them have 7 items or questions associated with it. And those 7 items that make up each of the scales are a result of many years of research and fine-tuning to identify those specific 7 statements that accurately and comprehensively capture the essence of each of the competency areas. So let's learn a little bit more about each one. And so self-awareness is about being aware of the behavior you demonstrate, your strengths as well as your limitations, and the impact that you have on others. And so leaders who are high in this skill are often said to be present rather than disconnected with who they are. And so do you recognize the statement that's here? This is the first statement that you use to rate the 2 people in our exercise. And this is one of the 7 statements that make up the social awareness scale. And so this statement really captures the essence of self-awareness well enough for you to be able to dramatically separate your best boss from your worst. Imagine how much more resolution you get with the remaining statements. Then you've got awareness of others. So this competency is about noticing and acknowledging other people, ensuring others feel valued, and adjusting your leadership style to best fit with others. So leaders who are high in this scale are often described as empathetic rather than insensitive to others and their feelings. And here's a statement you can see here that you used in rating your 2 people. And of course, there's 6 other statements here used in the assessment. So our third competency here is authenticity. So this competency is about openly and effectively expressing oneself, honoring commitments, encouraging this kind of behavior in other people. So people who are high in this skill are described as genuine, versus people who are low in this skill are often viewed as untrustworthy. So next we've got emotional reasoning. So this is the skill of using emotional information from yourself and others and combining it with facts and information when decision making. So people high in this skill make expansive decisions, whereas those low in this skill make more limited decisions that are more primarily focused simply on facts and technical data only. And the statement that you use here to rate your 2 people is makes ethical decisions. And again, there are additional statements that are used in the assessment itself. Our next skill is self-management. And so self-management is about managing our own moods and emotions, our time and behavior, and continuously improving ourselves. So this emotionally intelligent competency is particularly important. People high in this skill are considered to be resilient rather than temperamental in the workplace. And then finally, we have inspiring performance, which is about facilitating high performance in others through problem solving, promoting, recognizing, supporting other people's work. And so leaders who adopt a more inspiring style often empower others to perform above and beyond what's expected of them. And those who demonstrate low skill in this area are typically described as being indifferent. And again, you have the one of the 7 statements here that you use to rate the competency in our exercise. And so with 6 simple statements, 1 from each scale, you were able to successfully separate your best from your worst. Now, in reality, you're going to come across very few people with such a stark contrast as the 2 subjects that we used in the exercise. Most people are going to be somewhere in between. And because we're all unique and we're all in different places in our development journey, we all have different areas where we need to focus our efforts to continue to grow our emotional intelligence. As I said in the beginning of the session, it's expected that nearly 40% of all current US jobs are in occupational categories that are expected to shrink due to artificial intelligence by 2030. And those jobs range from office support to physicians, production workers to engineers, customer service to programmers, and more. And yet, this could be the greatest ever opportunity to differentiate yourself through your essential humanness. And how do you maximize your human capabilities? You do that through developing your emotional intelligence skills. And so there's an excerpt you can see from the article here. And what it says here is you can relate to the people around you better than any smart machine can. And so it's time to move this development of our human-oriented skills to a top priority. And they're going to become increasingly more important for the remainder of this decade. So the most important of these are things like empathy, understanding of ourselves and others, our ability to persuade, being able to authentically express our emotions at the right time, to the right degree, to the right people. And finally, being able to inspire, motivate, and engage those around us to drive discretionary effort and high performance. So the bottom line is don't wait. AI and machine learning are already here. They're evolving rapidly. So take the initiative to really assess where you are currently and develop yourselves and your team to show up with emotional intelligence and have a jump on preparing yourself for the changes that are going to be ahead. So a good place to start is to get a handle on the emotional culture in your organization. And so as a thank you for your participation today, I'd like to share a white paper with you. And if you take note of the URL that's at the top of your screen here, you can go to that and I'll provide you with a white paper that will talk to you about emotional culture and a little bit about this emotional culture index. And it's designed to measure 3 things: the current state, how often your people experience certain feelings at work; the expected state, how often the people in your organization feels reasonable and fair to experience these feelings at work, given the nature and the context of your workplace. And then finally, the ideal state, how often your people think they should ideally experience these feelings in your workplace in order to be effective. And so why does this matter? It matters because when you know how your people are feeling, you can better plan where to focus your energy to optimize engagement, productivity, retention, and resilience. And so in addition to this white paper, which again, I welcome you to download and take a look at, if you reach out to me by the end of this month, by October 31st, to learn more and schedule an emotional culture index for your organization to be conducted sometime between now and the 1st of February, so a little bit over 3 months, I will provide to you the index, a report of the results, and a private conversation with me to discuss these results, all complimentary. And so if you'd like to learn more about that emotional culture index and emotional culture itself, please download that white paper where you can learn more. And that offer is listed in the end there. So I'd love to chat with you about that if you're interested in. And so as we wrap up, I'd like to share my contact information with you here. We're going to have a few minutes for questions, but if any questions come up after today's session or we're not able to get to them before we wrap up today, please feel free to reach out with me, to connect on LinkedIn. And I really thank you for your time and your participation in the exercises today. It was a pleasure to be here with you. So I will stop sharing at this point. and ask if you have any questions at all.
Thanks, Sherry, so much. Renee had mentioned that there was an issue with the link, and Stephanie just put it in the chat box. So
Okay.
click on the link, and if anyone has any issues with that, let us know then.
Okay.
So now Q&A, yes, please put it in the Q&A box if you have any questions rather than the chat box. It's just easier for me to monitor the Q&A. I apologize. The sun is like glaring on me now all of a sudden.
Blinded by the light.
I know. All right, let's back a little now because it's like coming in on me. So Bev's asking if we can send the slides out. So this is recorded and it will be on the New Hampshire Tech Alliance YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see the whole presentation on there. So check back on the Alliance's YouTube channel whenever Stephanie gets around to putting that up, which will probably be in a couple days, Bev.
And I do see in the chat that someone did get an error message. I did test this link out, so I will, if anybody else is having a problem with it, email me directly, and I will send the article to you.
Okay.
I don't know why it's having a problem because I did test it.
Yeah, no worries. So we do have a question. What advice do you have to women struggling with other women with low emotional intelligence?
So, you've probably heard this before, it's hard to change other people. And so what we have to do is look at what is it that we can do within our own emotional intelligence to start to change our relationship, shift our relationship with what's going on, to be able to step back and notice. So here's the self-awareness piece. These skills all build, these competencies all build on one another. So if you start off with self-awareness, what's coming up for me? What trigger or button is this person pushing in me right now? And what's behind that? And so we create awareness of our own emotions and understanding of our triggers. And then that allows us to step back and determine how do we want to respond? Because oftentimes in the workplace, we get impacted by people around us, we get our buttons pushed, and we react. And so that only escalates the situation. If we can step back and understand, usually there's a value of some sort of ours that's being pressed on when we get that reaction and we get triggered. So what is it within me that's getting impacted? And now, how do I choose to show up in this situation? So it's not that we don't address the situation, but how do we shift our relationship to what's going on in a way that we can show up differently? Because sometimes if we show up differently, it can change what's going on in the interaction. And so we have to look at what's the trigger for me, what value is being pushed against, so that we understand the reaction is all within us, and how do we choose to respond in a way that's actually going to get us what we want, whether that's a better relationship, a better working relationship, something more effective. That was my lengthy response to that.
That was a good response.
That answered your question.
Yeah, as you were talking today, and then based on some people's responses, you realize the importance of it, because some people actually quit their jobs, and in an economy right now where people are desperate to retain quality employees and hire, everybody's in hiring mode. You realize as a leader how important it is, and that how organizationally you need to make sure all the leaders in your organization do have high emotional intelligence, because you don't want to lose a good employee. I think it was Jen who said she left because of the low emotional intelligence of her the manager, whoever she was referring to. So you see the importance of it for individually, and then just thinking about your own organization.
Absolutely. I mean, if I think back, particularly earlier in my career, there were people at that point in time, so I'm going to date myself now, we're talking like back in the 80s. And so I can remember, I will never forget this particular person. I never worked for him, but I was in human resources at the time, and he was one of the leaders in this manufacturing facility that I worked in. And what I will never forget about that is he was extremely successful, because he got results. But no one ever turned around and looked at all the dead bodies that were behind him. And that today, when you think about, there are still managers that are similar to that today. And that's such a lack of emotional intelligence that we don't recognize. Yes, we're creating results, but at what cost? We're losing people. We've got people who are disengaged. We don't have as much productivity as we could otherwise. We have people who hate coming in every day. It goes back to that exercise we did. What kind of discretionary effort are you willing to give somebody who treats you in an emotionally intelligent way versus what you're willing to do for somebody who is treating you poorly and is acting with low emotional intelligence? And it just this study after study that shows what impact on the bottom line it has when you have an organization where people are developing their emotional intelligence skills and utilizing those. It has such a positive impact on the business, which allows for growth. It allows for new jobs. It allows for people to be able to continue to grow inside the company. So it works for everybody, not just the shareholders. And it's so important. And as you say, Heather, particularly now.
Yep. So we have one more question here, and then it'll be our last question. So we'll have to wrap up so everybody can get on with their day. But remember, there will be networking after if you do have time to stay, and Sherry will stay if you have other questions that we don't get to, because I see a couple more coming in here. One question, and there's a few votes on it. How do we change society to value emotional intelligence in men?
Wow, I need more than 30 seconds to answer this. I think we all, what it initially makes me think of is like, we have to think about how we raise our children, right? So I'm not a good one to ask about that because I don't have kids myself, but it is really beginning to start with what you've got control over. So we can have a ripple effect if we begin to embrace the importance of our humanness and the fact that that's the one thing the robots won't have on us, at least for some time to come, is if we can embrace that and begin to model that for others, then slowly but surely we can begin to have an impact. I do know actually a lot of men that are very high in emotional intelligence, and I know a lot of women that are low. So I don't think it's targeted at any particular sex. I think it's the person themselves and how they're brought up and what their values are and all of that. So I think if we start with what we have control over and we begin to model the behavior, then that ripples to our colleagues, to the people around us, to the people who work for us. And over time, we start to make a change. But there'll always be people that are lower in these skills, but we can only influence what we can around us. So I always take it back. What can we do within our circle of influence to start to make that change?
Yeah, good point. So one more question we have here, and I think we have a couple more minutes. We can get to it. Could you remark on people who may express too much emotion at work? Yeah. Do you have a recommended gauge for those who may not know they're expressing too much emotion at work?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to when we talked about those different competencies. Part of it is expressing our emotions is an important part of emotional intelligence. However, it's at the right time with the right people to the right degree. So it is a skill set to learn what is appropriate at any particular point in time. So for instance, what I think of as that leader in the organization who is not expressing what's going on. And what happens is now their body language starts to give away, and maybe even their tone of voice starts to give away a little bit about how they're feeling, but that doesn't match up with what they're saying. And so what happens is when you have that misalignment, people start to make things up. well, did you see how this person was acting? And they're saying one thing, but they're acting another. And then they make story up about what's really going on. If the leader instead had shared in an appropriate manner, perhaps their frustration with what was going on right now, and here's what we need to do to resolve this issue, then those are the kinds of things that are appropriate. Too much, now this feedback, if you're in a position to provide feedback to the person about how much emotion is being expressed, and what might be a better way to express that in the right way, that's a step that you can take. But yes, there's if you express too much to the wrong people at the wrong time, that's a low emotional intelligence behavior.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry. Really appreciate it. If you have more questions, like I said, Sherry will be staying after, so you can find her at a table and just double click over. Really appreciate you, your insightful information. I love doing my chart. And my leader from a long time ago, it was a man as well. So I agree. It doesn't matter. It's all look inward, and really good advice. So thank you so much, Sherry. Really appreciate it.